Now, Ian Jessop on CFAX 1070.
Good afternoon, this is Ian Jessop from the Vancouver Island State of the Island Economic Summit in Nanaimo. On the program this afternoon, we're going to talk to a number of individuals. In the first segment, we're going to talk to Doug Stout, Vice President of Energy Solutions and External Relations for Fortis BC, and also Cam Matheson, Vice President of BC Hydro. What does the future hold for Vancouver Island? At 1:30, we're going to talk about entrepreneurial savvy. Why do people get into business? And more importantly, how do they stay in business? Daniela Kubalik, owner of Silk Road, and Paul Underhill, founder of Groove Nutrition, and Carrie Slavins, the managing editor of Douglas Magazine, will be here. Then after 2 o'clock, the future is green energy. Seabreeze Power, Director of Partnership Development, Andrew Walls will be here from New Energy Corporation, and Tom McDowell, the Program Lead for Green Tech Exchange. And in the final segment, Gary Mason, columnist with the Globe and Mail. Let's start with Cam Matheson, Vice President of BC Hydro. Cam, thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Cam, tell us what you're going to present this afternoon with respect to BC Hydro.
Well, we're talking about some of the many capital projects we have going on Vancouver Island and the necessity for them, which is really that for the first time in essentially a generation, the electricity system needs major reinvestment, both from an aging asset standpoint and from a growth standpoint. Vancouver Island is really no different, although there are some particular issues on Vancouver Island, including the rate of growth here, which puts it really at the top of the list for us around areas where we need to expand the system and build new facilities.
I heard many years ago, and this is going back many years ago, that we faced blackouts on Vancouver Island. Is that the situation today?
No, that's absolutely not the situation today. No. A lot of the planning we're doing, though, is to get us to the point where we never have to deal with a situation like that, and I don't believe we ever would.
What is the state of the power situation with respect to Vancouver Island in terms of its growth? People are coming here from other parts of the province. It's growing. Where does Vancouver Island's power come from?
About two-thirds of the power on Vancouver Island comes from the mainland. So in other words, the generating capacity on the island only accounts for roughly one-third of its total demand. As I said, the other two-thirds comes from a very small number of high-voltage transmission lines, two of which cross about mid-island, past Texada Island, and the other one coming in the southern part of the island from the Tsawwassen area.
Do those lines need to be upgraded?
They have been. So the 500 kV lines on the mid-island are relatively new and in very, very good shape, and the 230 kV system has been recently replaced just in the last 5-6 years.
Okay, let's talk to Doug Stout, Vice President of Energy Solutions and External Relations for Fortis BC. Doug, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Talk about the situation with respect to Fortis and natural gas on the island.
Well, natural gas, as you know, has been on the island a little over 20 years now.
Yeah.
And the system's been running well. We've been adding customers. I think we send out bills to 100,000 homes and businesses every month. And, like everywhere else in North America, the use of natural gas per homeowner, per business has been going down. Mm-hmm. And so that reduces overall usage and ends up in rising rates for other customers. So our real focus on Vancouver Island is to find, and elsewhere in the province, is to find new uses for natural gas that can better utilize that system. And so what we're focused on, and I'll talk a bit about today, is the transportation sector. And that's in things like transit buses, transport trucks, even ferries and tugboats, that we're looking to develop infrastructure and opportunities to use natural gas more broadly in the province or in Vancouver Island, and also to look at ways to switch people from heating oil and propane over to natural gas. It's lower cost and cleaner. So those are the major areas of focus for us on Vancouver Island.
How many homes in Vancouver Island have natural gas now?
So we have 100,000 customers, both residential, commercial, so probably an 80-20 split on that, roughly.
And you're looking to get more vehicles, more transportation systems hooked up to natural gas?
Yes, and probably one of the best examples is right here in Nanaimo. Mm-hmm. BC Transit is acquiring 25 buses. We provided some incentive funding to reduce the cost of those buses. And they're building a fueling station. Clean Energy, a company out of Chilliwack, is providing equipment, and that will get into operation next year. So that's going to be a win for the Transit Authority from a clean bus perspective, reduced cost for fuel, and quieter running buses. When you look across the world, go to Asia and particularly China, India, huge use of natural gas in transportation, very nascent in Canada. The U.S. has a big push on building infrastructure focused really on heavy transit, like transit, garbage trucks, long-haul trucks, that sort of thing.
What's the situation with respect to BC Hydro? I'm just going to move the microphone over here. With respect to Site C Dam.
Well, Site C Dam is a proposed third hydroelectric facility on the Peace River, and it's right now going through an environmental permitting process, which is a joint review process of the federal and the provincial governments, and public hearings are beginning this year toward the end of November, I believe.
Now, when you get power on Vancouver Island, do you get it from many independent power producers?
Yes. So Vancouver Island is interconnected with the BC Hydro grid, which covers virtually the entire province, and in that sense, it's a big bathtub of energy, and all the inputs, including all the independent power producers we have across the system, provide input into it, and Vancouver Islanders get the benefit of that.
What are some of the challenges facing hydro in the future, besides the population growth in Vancouver Island?
Well, the biggest challenges are the cost of the infrastructure that we're having to essentially refurbish. Our fleet, the modern fleet in the BC Hydro system is now reaching 40, 50 years old, and you've got very significant assets that have reached end of life or nearing end of life and need to be either refurbished or replaced entirely. And so the cost of doing that is going to be borne over the next 10 years as we embark on a very ambitious capital program where we're spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 to $2 billion per year doing all of that. And so inevitably that pushes the cost of electricity rates higher, and so that for me is our biggest challenge. How do we find the balance between doing the things we need to do on the system on the one hand and trying as best we can to keep electricity rates at a reasonable level for our customers?
What would you say is the biggest misconception, or maybe it's misconception, that people have about hydro rates in BC Hydro itself?
I think the biggest misconception is that rates are a product of operating costs inside the company. And the operating costs inside the company, you hear this all the time, if you lay off X number of people, won't that have a big impact on keeping rates as low as they can be? And really, it's not about the operating costs for the company. It's actually about the capital costs right now. Spending that $1.5 to $2 billion every year, that's what really has the biggest impacts on rates.
Doug, I noticed that you shook your head in agreement when Cam answered that question.
Yeah, we operate an electric business in the Southern Interior, and we've been on that same path of refurbishing old equipment, 100-year-old dams, power lines, and we've seen rates go up probably 50% in the past 5 years, which is hard on customers. But it is a fact of life that if we don't upgrade and repair that infrastructure, and the same is going to happen in the gas business across North America, then we will see the blackouts and the brownouts and those kind of things because reliability goes down. That's really the crux of it.
And I think the other thing that, the balance here is you try to replace assets or refurbish them on time, which means that if you leave it too late and they eventually break and you have outages, you're forced to spend a lot more money in real time in a very hasty way trying to fix them. And of course that ends up costing everybody more money.
It's like repairing your house, isn't it? You let it go into a state of disrepair, it's going to cost you more.
That's right. If you wait till the roof starts leaking, you're going to be into a much higher cost. But if you replace your roof when it needs to be replaced, it hurts because it costs you a lot of money all at once, but it's the right thing to do.
Doug, what are some of the challenges facing you on Vancouver Island?
As I said, really, it's about the use and the volume of gas through the system. Again, the better utilization of the system. So our gas system overall operates at about an average 30% utilization rate, which seems pretty low, but it's designed to meet the coldest day, a 1 in 20-year event. That happens maybe in a 5% probability. The fact is, most of the time, it's like insurance, where it's there for the cold weather. So that's really the thing, is how do we get a better optimization of that infrastructure that's there and use it better so the unit costs of it come down for everyone.
Talk about marketing natural gas on Vancouver Island.
It's, we're fairly proactive on that front. A lot of it focuses around lifestyle, comfort, of natural gas heat, fireplaces, that type of thing. We also have programs, as I said, out there for fuel switching incentives to allow people to replace their oil and propane furnaces with natural gas, upgrade water heaters, that type of thing. So it's focused around getting gas in the homes, into the businesses, but doing so with the most efficient appliances that are out there today.
Gentlemen, I appreciate the fact that you came in. You have speeches you have to give in a few moments. Thanks very much, Cam Matheson, BC Hydro, and Doug Stout, Fortis BC. Appreciate it. We'll take a commercial break, and when we come back, our guest will be Ralph Nilsson, president of VIU.
Call us. Interactive Talk. Ian Jessop on CFAX 1070.
Welcome back. Our next guest is Ralph Nilsson, president of Vancouver Island University, and he's here to talk about the importance of Aboriginal education. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Well, appreciate the opportunity.
Now, talk about the importance of Aboriginal education. I mean, Aboriginals, I grew up in an Aboriginal community in Prince Rupert, and it was many years ago, and you could see the difference in the Aboriginal students, how at that time they felt intimidated, and they were outside of their own culture, and I thought it was a very sad situation for them to be in. So explain what you're doing with the education of Aboriginal students.
Well, first and foremost, we're an institution here in Nanaimo that is open and welcoming to all students from all over the world. But in particular, we pay a lot of attention to and support First Nations communities from up and down the coast. There's 53 communities on the island. There's a number up and down the coast. And we provide opportunities for access and support to ensure that they're successful in their post-secondary education. We have over 2,000 First Nations students at our institution, and that ranges from students in access programs on through students in the master's degree programs that we provide. The importance of post-secondary education can't be underestimated, because indeed there's been a long time where access has been very difficult, where there hasn't been a funding available, and there still isn't adequate funding available for all the students that are coming out of the First Nations communities to be able to access education. And that number continues to grow, because the demographic is such as it's the fastest growing population that we have in Canada. The access has been limited, and indeed the funding has been capped, so that the opportunities for the bands to support their young people, and indeed people in transition looking for retraining, to support them to come back to post-secondary education is extremely difficult because they don't have the funds to do it. So there's a real challenge that exists on that piece. Also, historically, the educational experience working with the non-Aboriginal community has been very difficult, and we've talked about that a lot in recent years with reconciliation.
Difficult in what way?
Well, difficult because of the residential school experiences that their parents and their grandparents experienced, and the understanding of what education was and what it did to their communities, what it did to their culture, is very, very painful. And so how do we move beyond that? How do we provide a place that provides respect? So one of the things that we do in our institution is we have a number of elders that are a part of our faculty, and they are a critical part of our faculty because it demonstrates to the community, and it's particularly the First Nations communities where these students are coming from, that we respect traditional ways of knowing, traditional ways of learning. And our elders are in the classroom. Our elders are part of the learning environment that we have at the institution. And it's through that respect that's developed, those kind of ethical dialogues that we can have where we respect Western knowledge, we respect the traditional knowledge of the First Nations people. And it has equal weight in the context of our understandings and our development. It provides a space where these students feel welcome, and indeed it's a critical part of their ability then to be able to move into a community where they're respected. And they're not isolated, they're not filtered out, they're not told that what they know and how they learned and what they learned is wrong, but rather, how does that complement and how does that help them build and grow and gain strength as an individual from a community that has thousands and 10,000 years of resiliency on this coast?
How difficult was it to get the elders into the classroom?
It's always a challenge. When we initially opened up and offered opportunity, we were extremely fortunate to have Ellen White, who is from here in Sinamuk, who was the first elder that was a part of the institution, be willing to come and share. her understandings, her cultural knowledge, and indeed to be a part of the classroom in our First Nation studies. We also had our current Chancellor's father, Dr. Atleo, who was willing to come and participate and really push hard on developing a First Nation studies program. But Auntie Ellen, who we affectionately call Ellen White at our institution, has been a key leader in drawing other elders in and drawing other people in, and also building the dialogue between all the non-Aboriginal individuals in the institution. When you come to our campus, you'll see our signs on our campus that say Vancouver Island University. But a big banner along that sign is the traditional language of the Sinémith people here. In Cowichan, it's traditional Cowichan language. In Powell River, it's the Siouxlamin people's language. But that message is a very, very clear message about the welcome that is provided by the institution for all people, and particularly what it is the elders and the community saying education is important, and it's important that all people come here to learn.
It's really breaking down barriers.
We're very fortunate because we have so many committed people. We're a values-based institution that believes in opportunity and believes in providing support. And collectively as an institution, whether it's the staff or the faculty, you see a real commitment to ensuring that those who are coming to the institution are provided a space where they can learn and grow, and a place where they can learn and grow with respect, and respect of who they are, respect of where they come from, whether it's one of the international students from the 83 countries in the world that come to our campus, or whether it be from all of the different First Nations communities up and down the coast across BC or indeed across Canada. We have a real collection of wonderfully diverse individuals from these multiple different cultures, and we learn from every one of them. They come and they're willing to share. And if we can continue to create that environment, then they come in, they feel successful, they feel a part of something, and indeed they're able to achieve the outcomes that they want. Some come in without the skill levels that are necessary, but we have programs in place that provide that in a very respectful environment. The support so that indeed they can achieve at the programs that they're interested in pursuing.
Do you have Aboriginal teachers as well?
Yes, we do. And more all the time. We're continually looking to provide support and looking for individuals who come from different Aboriginal communities and to come and be a part of our community.
It really is. The residential schools really scarred the Aboriginal community.
Well, I think, as we know from the apology that Prime Minister Harper gave, and we're looking for some continued follow-up on that apology to see where the investments are going to be in education. There's a clear recognition that the approach to education that has become recognized as a result of these reconciliation dialogues of the incredible damage that was done through the residential schools. We now have a responsibility as a collective in this country to make sure that we're providing the space, providing the support to ensure that the people who are coming behind the grandmothers and the grandfathers and the parents who were so challenged by that residential school experience to come into our institutions and get the support that these young people come in to get the support that they need to move on and really develop the capacity that we know that they have, the incredible strengths that we know that they have, and contribute to all of our communities the way that we know that they can. And they have, again, in their communities for thousands of years. Our communities would just be so much richer by virtue of the strength that they bring to us.
Absolutely. Earlier you talked about access is limited and funding has been capped. Talk about that. Did you mean specifically for Aboriginals or for students generally?
The funding for Aboriginal students, the First Nation students, not all Aboriginal students, but First Nation students in particular, comes through their bands, and the federal government funds the bands. And back in the 90s, the educational funding was capped with a 2% cap. And as a result of that, the growth over time has been limited by virtue of that 2% cap. And then also, since that time, the growth in Aboriginal young people who are eligible has been quite dramatic, considerably more than the funding that's available. So it was capped at a certain place in time. The growth in the population has been dramatic. Probably, I don't know what the numbers would be, but I'm going to guess 2 and 3 times or more in some communities. Yet there's no more money available. It's been capped at 2%. The cost, if you look at the cost of tuition at universities, the cost of tuition at colleges, during that period of time, over the last 18 years, you'll see that it's a heck of a lot more than the cumulative of 2%. And that's one of the big problems. The money is just not there, is just not available for all these young people, and indeed for the people that are coming back for retraining, to be able to access post-secondary education. It's a real problem, a real constriction. And so we look at any ways that we can within our institution to be able to provide access and provide support. Provincial government has done a good job in BC of saying, if you don't have your upgrading, your adult basic education, your dog would. There is free access to adult basic education through our colleges and the universities that provide those types of programs in this province. So that's a positive. But after that, the cost of tuition is very real and a real challenge for all of us.
Talk about Vancouver Island University and how it's grown over the years.
Well, Vancouver Island University has a long history. It started as a trades institution back in the 30s, got college programming in the late 60s, college and university working together, became a university college in 89, and then became Vancouver Island University in 2008, full-fledged university. But we've kept that spread of programs because we're an institution that wants to remain relevant to the communities that we serve, and there's a lot of transition in these communities. We want to be responsive to the needs of the community that we're in and making sure that we're understanding the transition from a resource extraction economy to a knowledge-based economy, and how do we provide the human capital to be able to support this changing economy. And then also we're innovative. We're looking at partnerships and collaborations and everything else that we can do to continue to provide the kind of supports that we know is growing demand for education. And the government's in a situation right now, they don't have the tax revenues to be able to support us the way that they have in the past. You know, we've seen a reduction in terms of our aggregate budget and the base funding that we receive from provincial government. The number has changed quite dramatically in the last few years because the cost of education continues to go up. The grant has remained fairly stable. So what we're looking at is how do we create partnerships? How do we create opportunities to work with others to ensure? So we're working with the bands down in Cowichan, and we're working with the bands here and the First Nations. We work with the school districts and looking at all kinds of different opportunities for working with the school districts to look at different ways of ensuring that students coming out have the trades access before they finish their K-12, so they can have dual credit programs where they can move into the university fairly readily. So we're really looking at as many different types of opportunities as we can.
Ralph, I think what you're doing with the importance of Aboriginal education is fantastic, and I wish you well. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm just going to, one more point is that on Vancouver Island, we're very fortunate to have 5 publicly funded post-secondary institutions. And the 5 presidents have just recently gotten together to look at ways that we can work together to ensure that we're providing multiple pathways for multiple opportunities for people on the island.
Great. Ralph Nielsen, President of Vancouver Island Universities. We'll take a commercial break and go to the news, and when we come back, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. Why do they do it?
Now, Ian Jessop on CFAX 1070.
Welcome back. We're at the Vancouver Island Economic Summit in Nanaimo, and we're talking about entrepreneurial savvy, those crazy people who go into business for themselves, and why do they do it? My guests are Daniela Kubalik, owner of Silk Road, and Paul Underhill, founder of Groove Nutrition. Thanks for coming in. Daniela, let's start with you. When you decided to open Silk Road, what was going through your mind with respect to opening a tea shop?
Well, you know what? It was 21 years ago, and it was before tea became really popular in North America.
God, you must have been 12.
I was 22, actually, which is the perfect age in my case anyway, because I had no idea what I was getting into, and that was the best thing ever for me, because I learned the business side of it along the way. You know what? I came to entrepreneurialism as someone who was passionate about a subject. So in my case, it was tea, and it was something that I wanted to share with people. And along the way, I discovered that I was good at the business side, and that I really enjoyed the business side of it. What was going through my head was that I wanted people to drink higher quality tea than what they were, and I was kind of obsessed with that, and I still am. But, you know, I also had a lot of people saying to me that they thought I was absolutely crazy, you know, for doing what I was about to do, because they didn't see the opportunity that I did.
What do they tell you now?
Well, now they're actually... Now they're eating crow a lot of the time, but I'm starting to see, I think, what tea is. But, you know, in fairness to them, I think 21 years ago, people didn't see the potential in tea in the way that they do now. So it's come a long way. And I guess, you know, I think one of the attributes that I see in a lot of successful entrepreneurs is that they're often visionaries. You know, and that they see things and opportunities that other people don't view as opportunities. And then I think you have to have the tenacity to then execute on it, because I think a lot of people sometimes will see things, but really, I think it comes down to the execution side, too.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk to Paul Underhill. Paul, you were nodding in agreement with some of the stuff that Daniela said.
Absolutely. It resonates with me. I would echo her comments.
So you got into nutrition.
Yeah, and that came out of my need. And much as Danielle was interested in tea. I was sick. I was born with cystic fibrosis, which is a genetic condition, and I was really struggling for health. And I knew, despite having a sweet tooth and not really always eating healthy, I knew that premium nutrition would be of help to me. So I looked around at what was being given to me to help supplement to my diet, and I really didn't like the quality of meal replacements, and I thought there's got to be something out there. I went looking for a natural, hopefully organic sort of version of these things, and found nothing, and I decided to make my own.
So you started Groove Nutrition.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm a co-founder. My partner Steve and I co-founded this 5 years ago, and we now have 4 of us strong, including Dr. Kim McQueen, a local naturopath, and her brother-in-law, my friend James McQueen. But yeah, we started Groove Nutrition, and we started basically working years ago on this idea of producing Canada's healthiest beverage that would be something people could turn to, whether they're sick people in need of premium health and nutrition that goes along with that, or if they're athletes, to the everyday, businessmen and soccer moms.
So why is your product, in your mind, better than others?
That's a great question, and I think it came down to, when we looked at the similar types of products, there wasn't anything that was perfectly nutritionally balanced, that had, the right ratio of protein to net carbs to fiber and healthy fats. So ours is the only beverage of its kind in the world that has significant omega-3 content from organic flaxseed oil. And we felt the importance for sick people who are trying to quell inflammation, that organic flaxseed oil is a great source of that. And similarly for athletes who are also trying to quell inflammation after working out. So that's a key differentiator, is our use of, as I say, significant omega-3s, over 3,000 per. But it's the overall balance and the idea of being of higher quality. There's no sugar and corn syrup and things that you might find in other things. The idea of being all natural and as healthy as you can in a ready-to-drink format.
So both of you got into the business essentially for the same reason. You wanted to have better nutrition, and Danielle wanted to have better tea.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what sort of mistakes did you make when you got into business? When you look back, now,
you know what?
20 years.
There's so many mistakes that you make, and I think it's just, and mistakes can teach you so many different things. I mean, you're making mistakes all the time. I think, it's almost hard to remember because there were so many along the way. I think that, I guess one mistake was that I started to become an authority on tea, and I think that very early on I thought that people were going to be ready for some of the extremely exotic and obscure teas that I was interested in. And in the first few years of the business, it took more education to create that need and that market than I thought it might. But I guess I always see the opportunity in every situation, and I think that, creativity is something that so often flows from issues and concerns or limited resources. And I think looking to, the panel this afternoon that we're speaking on around really what the opportunities are for entrepreneurs on Vancouver Island, I think that, there's some challenges with doing business here, but there are also opportunities as well. I think that, for instance, we're a more isolated marketplace, we're lower density, but then there are also a lot of other opportunities in the sense that, for instance, if you can be successful here, and really successful here, you can often take that on the road and translate that to other markets. I think we also, one of the things that I think we are exporters of is really culture and lifestyle. Mm-hmm. A lot of people move here because of the culture and lifestyle, and actually Paul and I were just chatting about this before the show, and really, I mean, people live here and they choose to live here because of the lifestyle. We're very fit, we're very healthy, we have consumers who are interested in all of those things, so I think that it's the perfect sort of nurturing ground for these types of customers and then these types of products.
So, Paul, when you got into business, what sort of mistakes did you make when you look back on it?
Yeah, well, I can tell you one classic mistake that I made was concerning timeline. I walked into Lifestyles Market on Douglas Street, and I asked the nutrition guy behind the counter there, what do you have that's all natural, organic, and meets these criteria? And he's like, gosh, to be honest, we don't have anything ready to drink that meets that criteria. And he said, but if you did, I can tell you we'd be interested in selling it. So I was like, wow, listen, and his name is John. So listen, John, I can tell you what, I'm going to go and bring this to market because this has to be done, not just for me, but for anyone else. And I hope to be back here within 3 months and get on your shelves. And that was how naive I was about how quick it would take. And to be honest, it was 3 years of hard work until we were even ready to go there.
So 3 years. What were you doing during the 3-year period? Just trying to refine your product?
Well, it's a great question. I spent 6 months in the kitchen in my house, messing around with recipes and trying to find things that would be healthy and taste good. But the truth of the matter is, actually, was really put back because of my condition. Cystic fibrosis had advanced so much that my lungs were in a state where eventually I required oxygen 24/7. And I had reached out, thankfully, prior to that decline, to work with Dr. Kim McQueen on refining the formula and to get my help from Steve and James and bring it to market. But even with the four of us working together, there was struggles in that no one had ever done what we were trying to do. No one had ever put these ingredients together in such a fashion, and quite frankly, we were told it couldn't be done. So we made mistakes, I think all of us, in assuming that it would be a little bit easier than it was, and looking back, it was a lot more work than you ever would have guessed. At the same time, I think we can agree now, looking back, that it was worth it, and those early mistakes were ones that were good to learn.
Daniela, what does it take for an entrepreneur who tells friends or relatives the idea that they have in mind, and they're told it's not a good idea, it's not going to work, it's going to fail? And what does it take in an entrepreneur's mind to overcome that?
Well, I think it takes tenacity. I mean, I think, but I think that some of those questions that you get asked, you better be able to answer, And what was interesting for me, and I see this in successful entrepreneurs as well, is that when I would get asked those hard questions, it made me more and more passionate about what I had intended to do, and it really reaffirmed my belief that this was something that could be successful, because I sought to demonstrate that to other people and say, look, you know what, here's what I'm seeing, and in my case, for instance, what I felt and saw is that tea had a lot of potential and was just as interesting and nuanced as wine, for instance, but was totally behind in the North American market, and I mean, look at the huge wine sector that we have here, and I thought, this is a drink that has that potential and that can transcend, what it is today. And, so I think that the more that people question me, the more it affirmed my belief. And I think that, there's no question that at the same time, when people question you, and, it can get a little bit, sort of intense and it can get a little bit demotivating. But at the same time, at the end of the day, if you're finding answers to those questions that people have, and you better have answers to those questions, because, customers are unforgiving, and so they should be, I mean, when you bring a product to market or a brand to market, it's about quality, it's about experience, it's about all of those things. So you better be able to answer those questions. But I think that a sign for me certainly is that the more I got asked those questions, the more excited I became about what I was going to do.
Okay, final question for both of you. Where do you see your business in 5 years, Daniela? Silk Road.
In 5 years, Silk Road has continued to grow at a really controlled pace that I've been managing. And so you're going to continue to see Silk Road grow and continue to see the things that are really important to Silk Road. Experience that those things are going to get better, if anything.
How many locations do you have?
I have 2 retail stores, and then I also do wholesale across Canada, and I also have a very busy mail order business too.
Oh, okay. Okay, Paul, where do you see your business in 5 years?
In 5 years, I would like to see us really spread throughout North America in a variety of channels. Right now, we're primarily confined to natural grocery with a few sort of satellite operations in the running stores and for a city like stores, West Hayes, these sort of things. I want to see us expand to the point where we're easily and readily available to all those who agree that they shouldn't be sacrificing their health for convenience. And so that really means eventually making our way into more convenient locations, perhaps even convenience stores and gas stations, and saying this is an example of something that's healthy that people choose, and they can find us for quick serve restaurants and perhaps even Starbucks one day. Who knows?
Interesting thing about talking to you, both of you, when you talk about your product, you have this enthusiasm and your eyes light up. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I see that, and I feel that same way. So
yeah, great. Thanks for coming in. Daniela Kubelik, owner of Silk Road, and Paul Underhill, co-founder of Groove Nutrition. You want to say something?
Nothing. Thanks very much.
Okay,
thank you. It's great to be here. Cheers.
Thank you. We'll come back and talk to Alex Blassie, founder of Stratpad, and Kelly Slavins, managing editor of Douglas Magazine. We'll take a break and come right back.
Invigorating talk. Ian Jessop on CFAX 1070.
Welcome back. We're at the Vancouver Island Economic Summit, and we're talking about entrepreneurship in this half hour. And with me is Alex Blassie, founder of Stratpad, and Carrie Slavins, managing editor of Douglas Magazine, and many others. Yeah. Okay, let's start with Alex. Alex, I don't know anything about StratPad. Fill me in. Fill the listeners in.
Well, StratPad is a very simple. It helps businesses anywhere in the world think about their business carefully, walks them through the planning process step by step, and then helps them track their progress to success, and then warns them if they're going off track. What we wanted to do is we wanted to deliver some fresh thinking, some fresh tools, some fresh learning using at first an iPad, and now next week it'll be in a browser running on any laptop, desktop around the world. And since starting on the island here 2 years ago, we've now got 65,000 customers in 127 countries. That's what we do.
So tell me how this idea came about. I mean, were you just sitting at a bar one night and decided, we need this?
No, it came about, I've been a serial entrepreneur prior to this, and a big systems
serial entrepreneur.
So I've started and run and sold successfully 3 other companies. I was also a Big 5 consultant, just finished off an MBA, and I was teaching entrepreneurship at Royal Roads. And as I was sitting there and doing some consulting with small businesses, I realized that strategy and the strategic thinking is so absolutely powerful, but it's so complex, so expensive, and so inaccessible to small businesses. And small businesses, as you know, have a super high failure rate. So I thought if we could take that thinking, simplify it, and deliver it in a way that was accessible to small businesses, then that might be a way for us to contribute to strengthening small businesses around the world and strengthening our society. So it took a couple of years of thinking and created StratPad. That's right.
Now, Carrie Slavins, managing editor of Douglas Magazine, and EM, who's been in the studio in Victoria many times. Now, when I look at these magazines, when I first saw them, I didn't think they were Victorian magazines because they were very high-class magazines.
Isn't it something? And, the thing is that Victoria, a lot of people would be surprised to know that Victoria is a very entrepreneurial community. So when we started developing Douglas, I'll talk about Douglas today, we wanted it to reflect the spirit of entrepreneurialism. There's an excitement, there's a freshness, and frankly, we think island businesses can stand up to any businesses in the world in terms of their innovation and competitiveness. So we wanted a magazine that really reflected the fact that we have world-class businesses here.
So with everyone going electronic, why do you go into a magazine business?
Well, there's a big assumption that print is going down, but the magazine market is actually one of the areas of journalism that is strengthening. Local magazines in particular have very, very strong followings, and our magazines are doing very well. So we haven't felt that we've had to give it all up and go digital because people still like to have their hands on those magazines. Reading a magazine is an experience. You don't get that on Twitter. Yes, we tweet. Yes, we do Facebook. But we can't provide that experience digitally. It just doesn't work as well.
There's some of us who like the pictures, too.
Some of us really do like the pictures.
Alex, tell me, when you got the StratPad developed, how did you go about marketing it?
Well, we simply just put it on the App Store, and within 2 days we had sold 183 downloads, so we knew almost immediately that we had something. And we really haven't done a whole lot of marketing since then. We've done some PR. We've got a fabulous communications consultant, Manuela Bizzato, and she's helped us to get press in Douglas. We're the Island App of the Year. Thank you, Carrie. And also Forbes magazine and The Economist magazine twice, and that's helped to get the name out. But really, it's word of mouth, getting out there to small businesses who then love the product and then go back onto the App Store and rate it with 5 stars. So over the course of the last 2 years, we've become the world's highest-rated strategy and business planning app in the world, which is fabulous, all through to our customers.
That's fantastic. What have you learned in this being, you said you're a serial entrepreneur, what have you learned from your past mistakes? Other than not to do them again.
Yeah, well, even then, sometimes, past mistakes. I think what we want to do as an entrepreneur right now is understand very, very, very early whether you've got an idea that's going to make sense. And the tools that are available now are making it so much easier than it ever has been in the past. So for any entrepreneur that's out there, I would first of all say, write down the idea that you think is a great idea, write it down on a piece of paper on 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then go and talk talk to 50 potential customers, 50 customers who you think would buy this product, and ask them, do you think this is a good idea? And if so, how much would you pay for it? And if not, why not? And at the end of that week, you will have not spent a single penny, and yet you will have learned whether indeed you have an idea, and if so, who your customers are, etc. So that would be the mistake that I've made before. In the old days, we used to raise a bunch of money, build a product, take it out there, market it, and then only then after having spent $250,000 or $500,000 or $1 million, which I've done, and find that it works or doesn't. That's a big mistake, and it takes time and energy and people's money. So let's not do that.
I mean, that's incredible advice, just to go around and ask people. I mean, it's how simple is that?
How simple is it? And even if you can't go find them in your neighborhood, you can use free tools like SurveyMonkey or Facebook or Twitter, or all these tools are out there that you can set up a one-page website for no cost, and then buy $100 worth of AdWords, and to see whether people will actually click on your ad and are interested in your product or your idea anywhere in the world.
Carrie, with Douglas Magazine and other local magazines being successful, as you mentioned, what's the reason for that?
I think it's because we try and tell stories that matter to local entrepreneurs, people in businesses, and people in leadership positions. We actually do what Alex does, in a sense. We go out and talk to people who we think are our readers or who want to be our readers, and we find out what matters to them. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes it's not the things you want. If you try and imitate a national magazine, for instance, you're going to fail locally, because you need to have an ear to the ground. You need to be talking to people here. And you'll find that, just for instance, at the luncheon here at the Valleja Summit, we had Gary Mason from the Globe and Mail talking about the pipeline issues. So one of the things is, are pipelines good for economic development here on the island? Well, instead of reading what the provincial media says or the national media, I need to go out and I talk to people here. What do you think about pipelines? How does it affect your business being here on the coast? If I make an assumption based on reading what the big guys say, I'm going to get it wrong. So I think that's part of Douglas's success, is really having an ear to the ground.
Do you like your job?
I love my job. I love magazines. I'm a magazine addict. I think I was born with a magazine. And so the idea of having Douglas, Yam, and Salt magazine, and being able to get my fingers on them all, I'm in heaven. And I love entrepreneurship as well. Unlike Alex, I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I'm a recovering entrepreneur. I own my own advertising agency for 14 years. Douglas allows me to make the transition, because I still have to move fast, think fast, and take a lot of risks, but I don't have to be the boss anymore. So it's an ideal position for me.
Alex, do you like being, obviously you like being an entrepreneur, but what is it about entrepreneurship that really gets your blood flowing?
Well, for me, entrepreneurship, I think, for me and for many, many, many entrepreneurs, isn't about so much money. That's a part of it. But the number one motivator for me, and I think for many entrepreneurs, and I speak to, as you know, tens of thousands of them around the world, is the fact that they're able to exercise their creativity in a way that they can't find somewhere else. And so entrepreneurship really is the exercise of taking creativity and turning it into something that, for most entrepreneurs, is supportive of their communities. And that's what I am doing, and that's what I know many of the entrepreneurs I'm in contact with do.
Now, what's your next idea?
You know what? I think that the StratPad idea has got lots of legs left. We think, and I'm going to talk about it this afternoon, we think that we're just in the middle of Phase 2, and by the end of Phase 3, we can create something on the island here, completely island-based, that's going to be $100 million in sales or more. So we're going to spend time just bringing good ideas to entrepreneurs all over the world, and we think that they'll repay us with a nice little lifestyle.
That's fantastic. Okay. Carrie, what's your next big idea?
My next big idea?
Or the next big idea in the magazine business?
Well, I think where we're going, we've just launched one of our next big ideas, which is moving into the Calgary market with a magazine about Vancouver Island. That's what Salt magazine is all about. We believe that Calgarians love the island. They want to know about it. So we created a magazine about the island just for them. So we've actually just launched that big idea not too long ago. Mm-hmm. I think we're just going to keep going forward. We're increasing the visibility of Douglas magazine. It's building, finding better and better stories. And my goal is always just to get the best stories we can. And every issue we put out is a big idea for me.
So Douglas Magazine is about business.
Business and lifestyle, yes.
Yan is about?
I would say it's Victoria lifestyle, food, fashion, homes.
And salt is?
Salt is all about the wonders.
The big money to Calgary.
Bringing the big money from Calgary here.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's great to talk to you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Alex Glassy, founder of StratPad and many other future developments, and Carrie Slavins, managing editor of Douglas Magazine. Thanks. When we come back, we're going to talk about the future is green energy, and at 2:30 we'll talk to Gary Mason, columnist for the Globe and Mail. News is next.
Now, Ian Jessop on CFAX 1070.
Welcome back. We're at the Vancouver Island Economic Summit in Nanaimo, and this half hour we're going to talk about green energy. We're talking to Paul Manson, President and CEO of Seabreeze Power Corporation, and Andrew Moore. He's the solar program manager for Souk First Nation. Let's start with you, Paul. Seabreeze announced yesterday that it submitted an unsolicited term sheet to the BC government. Talk about that. Exactly what that is and what you propose.
Yeah, thanks. The background is that we have been developing for a number of years a very low environmental impact transmission line that would interconnect Victoria with Port Angeles, Washington, called the Wanda Fuca Cable. And the implementation of that piece of infrastructure would basically allow Victoria to receive electricity from two directions instead of just from the north, which is the case right now. The power comes across from the mainland at Duncan and further up. And what we're proposing is that the province of British Columbia buy firm power, that's 24/7, 365, for a 10-year period. And we believe that the price that we're offering at $69 a megawatt hour is a lower price than power can be purchased virtually anywhere or even through new build.
What is it being purchased for today?
Well, there's power which is produced in the legacy reservoirs and dams of British Columbia, which I believe is in the 2.5 to 3 cent range per kilowatt hour, $25 to $30 a megawatt hour. But there's a very finite amount of that power. And for example, the new power, which is projected to be produced at the Site C dam 10 years from now, is expected to be coming in at a price range that I've heard between $83 per megawatt hour and $110 per megawatt hour. So what it boils down to is that wherever you have new generation plants, the price is going to be inherently far, far higher than what the legacy power from the dams that were built in the 50s and 60s were. I guess the other price comparisons that would be of interest is that I believe the 6 wind projects which were awarded contracts in 2010 by BC Hydro collectively would have had a cost range to BC Hydro of between around $120 a megawatt hour and $145 a megawatt hour. So $69 a megawatt hour you can see is substantially less expensive than new wind, substantially less expensive than Site C, and I would guess that with rare exceptions, substantially less expensive than either run-of-river or biomass.
Okay, our other guest is Andrew Moore, Solar Program Manager for the Souk First Nation. And in spite of his English accent, he knows what he's talking about. Tell me how you got involved in this.
Well, I've been really engaged in particularly solar projects, renewable energy projects, since the 60s, I guess. I put up my first solar panel in 1966.
1966?
That's right.
Oh,
yes.
You were way ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Well, that was around that time when Jimmy Carter was putting solar panels on the White House, and Ronald Reagan took them off when he came into power. So it's been sort of zigzagging along in fashion, but I'm so pleased that Souk Nation gave us the opportunity to do this amazing solar project there. So 75 kilowatts in 3 demonstration projects. And when we put it up, it was twice as big as anything in BC. So it's a fabulous project, and we're very grateful to Ministry of Energy Mines, who gave us a grant towards it. And actually we had 20 different funders on this project, but that's the nature of innovation. So,
Andrew, can you tell us exactly what the project is, the solar project with the First Nations?
Yes, so we have 3 demonstration projects. One is demonstrating what it would be like if you're off-grid. And there are about 30 First Nations who are remote communities, off-grid, not connected to BC Hydro, using diesel. So renewables suddenly come into their own. It's a lot cheaper than diesel already. So that's something that we can all progress with right away. All our administration buildings have no bills. It's what's called net zero. So we sell surplus energy in the summer to BC Hydro and buy it back in the winter. So BC Hydro is acting as a sort of big battery, but all our bills are zero. I think this is the way of the future. Then we have a third array, which is huge. We sell that to BC Hydro through a net metering agreement. So the beauty of solar is it just sits there in the sun for the next 100 years, and we'll be selling energy to BC.
Now, Paul, tell us about Seabreeze and some of the developments that are currently in operation with your company.
Sure. Well, we're probably best known in British Columbia, where we're headquartered, for the original development of the Cape Scott Wind Farm, which is located at the extreme northern tip of Vancouver Island. It's a 99 megawatt wind farm. It's right on the verge of beginning commercial operations. All of the turbines are erected on 100-meter high towers. There's 55 of them.
55 turbines.
Yeah. And the wind park will be generating enough energy on an annual basis for around 100,000 people.
So that's almost 1/8 of the population of Vancouver Island.
Yeah, that's right. The power is being sold into the BC Hydro grid. I should point out, we initiated this project, but we did sell it to GDF Suez, which is a very large, very competent company operating throughout the world as an independent power producer. And they have done a phenomenal job of completing construction and bringing it into commercial operation.
Where do you see wind power going in the future?
Well, year over year, for around the last 15 years, it has had pretty well more than 20% growth rate. And prices have come down, efficiencies have gone up. Wind is ubiquitous. Virtually every country in the world has some degree of resource. And British Columbia actually was identified about 10 years ago by the World Energy Council as having the best economic wind resource in the world. There is a near perfect marriage, or an opportunity for one, between wind power and hydroelectric systems. Very few places in the world have this opportunity to combine these two resources together. The way it works is that when the wind is blowing, you back off on the generators of the dams, and during that period of time the water rises. In effect, you're building inventory, and when the wind dies off, you begin generation from the dams again. And so it's a very, very synergistic relationship between these two modes of generation.
Andrew, let me ask you, solar really hasn't caught on to any great degree in British Columbia. Why is that?
I think it's a cultural thing and a traditional thing that clearly BC Hydro is doing a very good job, and it's incredibly cheap compared with the rest of the world, or certainly the rest of the United States. But people often say to me, "Why are you doing a solar project in Souk? Isn't it usually soaking in Souk?" But we get more sunshine in southern Vancouver Island than Germany does, and Germany has the largest solar installations in the world. So if they can do it, we can do it.
Great, gentlemen. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. Andrew Moore of the Souk First Nations. He's the Solar Program Manager. And Paul Manson, President and CEO of Seabreeze. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
When we come back, we'll talk more green energy, and we'll have several guests. And at 2:30, we'll talk to Gary Mason of the Globe and Mail, the columnist who spoke at the luncheon today.
Where your opinion matters. Ian Jessop on CFAX 1070.
Welcome back. We're in Nanaimo at the Vancouver Island Economic Summit, and our guest today is Eric Lindquist of DEC Engineering. Eric, one of the things about, what was that?
Titus Infrastructure.
Oh, Titus Infrastructure. Oh, okay. I've got the wrong name. Titus Infrastructure Services Limited. One of the things about doing this job is that you get to meet people and talk to people you know absolutely nothing about. Eric, tell us about Titus Infrastructure.
Titus Infrastructure is an integrated district energy and water recovery utility firm. We specialize in making renewable utilities profitable by bringing to the market innovations that are locally grown in Victoria, proven in very large projects, as well as we wrap around that a business model that reduces the overall cost. We partner, some of the things that differentiate us from other utilities, we partner with the municipality, we partner with the developers, and what that does for us is it protects the consumer because we're partnered with the municipality, but it gives the municipality the economic advantage of working with the developer in new developments to anchor the renewable utilities into the community.
Give me an example of what you're talking about.
For example, West Hills is a 6,000 unit master plan community in Victoria. Right now there's about 450 homes built. It uses a district energy sharing system, which allows us to capture the energy that's in the community, so waste heat, waste cold, and by doing that we reduce the overall supply energy requirements. So in West Hills there's actually a traditional subdivision of some 50 or 75 homes, and then there's the balance of the community, the other 400 odd homes, is all on our district energy sharing system, and it's reducing the energy supply requirements by about 54% over the last 4 years.
Now, when you talk about capturing energy, explain how that's...
It's really quite simple.
Yeah? If it's simple, I'll get it.
Houses and heating, they pull from a warm pipe, and they reject cold water to a cold pipe. And houses and cooling, or buildings and cooling, pull from a cold pipe, reject warm water to a warm pipe. If we're in places like Whistler, with that Whistler's Athletes Village, which recovers energy from a wastewater treatment plant, when they upgrade that wastewater treatment plant to tertiary treatment, we'll be able to use the same infrastructure to distribute not just the thermal energy from what we recover from the sewage, but also the reclaimed water, which is almost drinking quality water.
Drinking quality water?
Very similar to what Dockside.
How different is the business in the last 10 years? What sort of changes have taken place in the last 10 years in terms of wanting to be more sustainable and green?
Well, I think that the biggest issue right now is the cost of fuel, and everything is tied to the cost of fuel. So what we try to do is recover as much of the energy within the community as we can, so that whatever we have to build to supply energy to that community can be substantially smaller and thereby more profitable for the utility. And the good news there is if the utility is not profitable, then it ends up having to go back to the government, whether it's a municipal utility or a private utility, ask for subsidies or rate increases, none of which is to the benefit of the consumer. So our focus is how do we integrate the technologies and the business models that will make the utility profitable, will protect the consumer, and allow us to expand into the community on a cash flow basis.
Now, I see on your business card that you have an office in England, and you're obviously an international company. How did you get involved with them?
In England? Basically, in 2010, Stockwell Day, who was former Minister of International Trade, his secretary called me up and said, we're very interested in what you're doing. We see the export potential. Would you have time to meet with the minister? I said, absolutely. So from that point, he put us on the global stage. He's now a shareholder in our company. And we're in discussions with some of the world's largest integrated, well, not integrated, but largest privately held energy and water utilities.
How did you get involved in this line of work?
Well, my background is in nuclear engineering and business restructuring, and
nuclear engineering.
Yes, I spent 8 years in nuclear engineering, 8 years restructuring businesses, and when I came to Victoria in 2005, I met with the developer behind the West Hills development, who was trying to build this 6,000 unit community, and he wanted to be LEED Gold or better. And he saw that it just cost money and he wasn't going to make a profit. So he asked me to help him restructure the project so that it could be profitable. So I, with my utility background, with my business restructuring background, put together the business models, the technologies, and the backers to do just that.
Where do you see this business going in the future?
Well, based on our current conversations, we have about $1 billion worth of projects in the pipeline in North America, and we're looking at licensing our technology and business platform to global utility players.
It's interesting. The last half hour, when I talked to entrepreneurs, I could tell just by the way they speak about the issues how passionate they were with respect to this, and I can see that in you. This really gets you going, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Why is it? What is it about it that...
Well, I think it's not only from an entrepreneurial standpoint the opportunity to make money, but it's also the opportunity to actually do so in a way that's actually beneficial to the global climate, the global economy.
Money's important.
Well, you can't make anything work without it.
That's right. But it's something else, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the opportunity to make a significant difference, a legacy for our next generation and beyond.
When you look at subdivisions being built today, whether they're small subdivisions or even larger ones, when you drive by, can you immediately tell what they should have done?
That's a dangerous pastime because you could get eaten up by that. Our focus is finding the developments that make sense, that provide a logical anchor for the municipality to expand out. And when we look at Europe, I mean, the big thing in Europe isn't necessarily the new neighborhoods, which account for maybe 1%. It's how do you renew the decaying infrastructure in a way that meets modern technologies. That's the biggest challenge they have in Europe right now, as far as I can see.
Yeah. And how do you do that?
Well, in Denmark, for example, where we're looking at a very large project, we're actually looking at partnering with the district heating companies as well as the municipality. And with respect to the new developments, one development has a sewer line on one side of the project, a district heating line on the other side. We'll use the sewer line as the primary energy source, capture that energy to provide more than enough energy for the community, but we'll also tap into the district heating return line. That's the energy that the district heating company couldn't use and is coming back to the plant to be upgraded, to be distributed back into the community. And by tapping into that line and using it for backup and peaking, we can give those incumbent district heating companies the migration path to migrate to more efficient, lower temperature, lower energy, and lower carbon technologies.
Is Europe ahead of us in regard to what you're doing?
Absolutely not.
No?
Not at all.
No. We're at the forefront?
Absolutely.
It's interesting. When I'd like another person to join in on this conversation, Brian Ember, who's the ICC group, the composting facility at Duke Point. Brian, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Sit down. Enjoy the show. We got a couple more minutes before we go to a news break. Tell us about your facility at Duke Point.
Well, we basically decided that we were going to build a facility somewhere. We tried in Victoria, politically very difficult. Came up here, very well received.
Everything in Victoria is difficult to get done.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Basically we got a commitment from the regional district that if a facility was built, that they would close the tip to organic materials, which they did. And we've been there since 2004. And finally getting the volumes to be profitable.
No problems at all?
Oh no, we've had problems. When we designed the
every business has a problem.
When we designed the facility 10 years ago, it was a state-of-the-art facility.
Yeah.
We've since built one in Scotland that is a state-of-the-art facility, and we're going to have to upgrade our facility here to meet those exacting standards, which we plan to do over the next 6 months.
Were there any challenges with the residents of the area with respect to your composting facility?
Initially, there was a little bit of resistance. I think most people feel that it's a great service to reduce landfill and reduce the greenhouse gas footprint for Nanaimo. For every ton that we process, we save 1.1 ton of greenhouse gas. So it's a significant contributor. We have had occasional odor complaints, and at the moment there's a report that the RDN is doing on the facility, but we're confident that that we have a state-of-the-art facility.
Brian, thanks for coming in. I'm sorry we couldn't give you more time, but we have to take a commercial break. Brian Imber of ICC Group and Eric Lindquist of Titus Infrastructure Services Limited. Thanks for coming in.
Now, Ian Jessop on CFAX 1070.
Welcome back. For the last half hour, we're going to have a conversation with someone I've known for, 30 years. Gary Mason, the columnist with the Globe and Mail. And Gary, how are you? It's been a while.
Ian, it has. It's really great to see you.
Do you know what I remember about you? Remember we were playing remember when we were in the press gallery?
Yeah.
And we played basketball at lunch.
Yeah.
And there was we played with members of the legislature.
Yeah.
And there was a dirty player named Barry Jones. And he always used to give the elbow. And I remember you were driving for a basket and pop, he hit you right in the nose and broke your nose.
You know what? It was actually Colin Hansen. Jones was on the floor, but it was actually Colin Hansen who broke my nose that day.
No, it wasn't Colin Hansen.
Yeah, it was Colin Hansen. It was Colin Hansen, I guarantee you, because I remember Colin Hansen. He lived one street behind me in Fairfield. And he felt so horrible about it that he came over to visit the house, and he brought a case of beer. But that was quite something, because I remember being taken away in an ambulance because there was so much blood all over the place. It was just like one of those bizarre fluke things. But
someone told you to hold your head backwards, and you started to choke on your blood.
Exactly. Was that you that told me that?
Great advice.
Great advice. Yeah. I have fonder memories of Victoria than that particular one. But yeah, that was. We still talk about that in our family. Yeah.
Tell me, you're here you spoke at lunch.
Yeah.
What did you speak about?
Well, I talked a bit about, I guess the theme would be the changing political landscape in British Columbia, sort of, and the fallout from the unexpected provincial election result in May. Fallout for both the NDP and the Liberals. Because, the world of both those two parties has changed dramatically as a result of that election. So I thought I'd talk to people about that today.
What did you make of the? I don't want to rehash the election results because we all know that. But what did you make of the NDP's loss and the reasons for the loss? I've expressed on the air on many occasions that the NDP has really lost its identity as a political party and doesn't know what it stands for anymore. It's trying too hard to win elections instead of stand for, stand for philosophy that it would articulate to the public whether the public liked it or not, as it used to many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really troubled right now. And I think John Horgan, who I had on the program last week, tends to agree that the party needs to look at itself.
Yeah.
What's your thought?
Well, you could have written that segment of my speech because I said, precisely the same thing. It's a party in search of an identity right now, and I think that there's factions of the party that all believe that they're right and that that they're the faction around which the party should be built. But of course, that's not how you win re-elections. You have to come up with sort of a common, kind of a broad-based mandate that appeals to as many people as possible. And I think that's the sweet spot that the Liberals found in that election. Let's face it, Ian. The Liberals win, the Free Enterprise Coalition wins election after election because they understand that fundamentally when someone goes into a voting booth, they vote in their own self-interest. And 9 times out of 10, that self-interest revolves around the question of jobs and employment. Who's best able to look after my job if I have one? And if I don't have a job, who's best able to create it? And once again, I mean, that was the question at the ballot box, and the Liberals formed that, and the NDP just still can't find the answer to that question, and it's kind of sad and pathetic in a way, because it's so fundamental. They know that that's going to be the question, and yet they couldn't do it this time. And beyond that, I think that you referenced Horgan, I referenced him in my speech. I think he has said that the party has lost its way in resource-dependent communities around the province. I think he's absolutely right. I mean, I think the party now has become almost captive to this political class in Vancouver that support Vision Vancouver. And as I said at noon hour, it's one thing for Gregor Robertson to run on an anti-resource development and pro-green platform in the city of Vancouver, where it's all professionals and people riding around on their bicycles. But that's not going to cut it, in the burbs and outside, outside of the city center. So that's the quagmire that the New Democrats find themselves in.
Do you see any young politicians, whether they're with the NDP, Liberals, or Green, who look like they will have a promising career?
That's such a great question. Because, of course, we've all been racking our brains thinking, okay, so who's the savior that is going to come around for the NDP? I mean, I think it's really quite telling that, when you look at, okay, so who's the front runner that everybody assumes it's Mike Farnworth, a guy who's probably the oldest serving member in the NDP caucus. I mean, he's
been there 20 years.
He goes right back to 1991. I mean, he was a cabinet minister throughout the 90s. I mean, I don't know, Ian, but given how easy it was for the Liberals to demonize the NDP and sort of cast the 90s as this bleak black shadow. I mean, I didn't think they were going to be able to do it again this election, but sure enough, they did. They used Adrian Dix to sort of serve their point. And now the NDP are going to come up with Mike Farnworth, who was a cabinet minister throughout so many of those bleak, dark years that the Liberals like to talk about. I don't know. It seems to me if that is their best hope, that's their best answer, that tells me a lot about the party. It tells me that there is no, young, exciting, smart, capable people that want to jump in and take this opportunity, because it's wide open.
You wrote a book many years ago with Keith Baldry about Bill Vander Zalm, and you were great covering politics, and you have a keen interest in it. Is the passion for politics still there with you?
With me?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, after I left Victoria to take on some management roles at the Vancouver Sun, I was able to write a sports column for 7 years, which was an absolutely fantastic job. It was a great job. It took me around the world. I mean, it was like a dream job. I was like a kid in a candy store.
You know what? I think some of the sports profiles you did are some of the best writing that you've ever done.
Yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity, and I loved it. I really did love it. But Ian, what happened was after 7 years of doing it, I had done enough of it, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And I didn't want to end my career, asking 21-year-old kids in a hockey arena who were making, $5 million a year, what did you think of, this, that, the other thing. I knew that what I really wanted to do was get back to my roots, which was covering politics, because that has always been in my blood. And as it turned out, just as I was thinking that way, the Globe and Mail in 2005 came calling and offered me this absolutely dream job to cover politics, to cover Western Canadian politics, to write on national issues. And now I consider that I have probably one of the best jobs in journalism in the country.
Can you write anything you want?
Yeah.
About anything you want?
About anything I want, yeah. So... Which is great. I mean, it's a couple of years ago I was at the Websters and I received an award, and when I went up there, I told people in the audience how privileged I was to have the job that I have. I mean, it's just I keep hoping and praying that I'm going to be able to do this until I decide I don't want to do it anymore. But yeah, so to answer your question, I can write about anything I want. Sometimes an editor will suggest things to me, some ideas. But Western Canada has now become part of my mandate, and so especially Alberta, because it's such a pivotal, important province, and it's our next door neighbor. So I breeze into Alberta, and when I do, I can call up the Premier's office and sit down with Alison Redford, and it's a terrific thing to be able to do.
Yeah, it gives you access.
Yeah. I mean, the Globe brand is still it still opens a lot of doors in this country.
Talk about the difference between politics in Alberta and politics in British Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you fly into Edmonton and you talk to the Premier of Alberta.
Mm-hmm.
How different is that talking to the Premier of British Columbia in terms of, I guess, politics?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of comparing the two premiers, I mean, they're decidedly different. I mean, Christy Clark is a more, I don't want to say less serious, but she's more of a happy-go-lucky person. I mean, during an interview with her, she's bound to crack a bunch of jokes and maybe say the odd off-color thing, at least off the record. And Alison Redford is very, very serious-minded. I mean, she's very nice. But, when you're interviewing her, she's concentrating hard on the questions. She's concentrating equally hard on the answer. She loves to talk about policy. Like, she likes to talk about deep policy. And if you can surprise her with a policy question, she admires you for it. Whereas our Premier, I think she likes to paint in very broad strokes. She's a populist. I mean, in the very sense of the word, she's a populist, and so she doesn't. I don't think she ever bogs herself down in the details. She leaves that to others because, when you communicate your policies to the public, you're not giving them the nitty gritty. You have to give them sort of a big picture, and I think that's one of the things that she does brilliantly. She communicates to the public in a way that so many politicians wish they could match.
We're talking to Gary Mason, columnist with the Globe and Mail. We'll take a commercial break and come right back.
Stimulating talk. Ian Jessop on CFAX 1070.
Welcome back. We're talking to Gary Mason, columnist with the Globe and Mail, and I want to read. Boy, Gary, you've won some awards. 6 times being the recipient of the Jack Webster Award, including as Commentator of the Year, and is also twice winner of the industry's highest honor, a National Newspaper Award. Mr. Mason is the author or co-author of 6 books, including the #1 bestseller, Patriot Hearts, which he wrote with John Furlong. And you worked for the Vancouver Sun. You worked for the Victoria Times Colonist. You're with the Globe and Mail now. You and I guess we were the end of the glory days in the press gallery at the legislature. Yeah, I mean, we had some fun. There was a lot of people. There was a lot of reporters working there. I tell people that there were 6 radio reporters working there full-time, and now there's only 2 working part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vancouver Sun had 2 people plus a columnist. Province had 2 people plus a columnist. Times Colonist had 2 people plus a columnist. And now it's bare. There's nothing there.
It's sad.
It really is sad. Now, what does that say about the state of journalism today?
Well, it's what it's saying is that the state of journalism. I mean, journalism is undergoing a radical change, a radical metamorphosis. There is a winnowing out of news organizations, and I think only the strong will end up surviving. The weak will die off, and I mean we're already seeing that. And as you referenced, I mean, we actually lived to be part of the glory days. I mean, the gallery. I love to tell people about what the gallery was like when I first arrived over there, and
tell our listeners what it was like. I mean,
well,
rather than me tell it, I think you should tell it.
Well, I mean, it was just. I mean, it was the sort of the tail end of the kind of the wild days, So we. I mean, not that this was defined what the press gallery was about, but I mean, for instance, one of the things that we had in the press gallery was a beer machine, and the beer machine was full, and it wasn't
always used,
and it wasn't uncommon for us to open a couple bottles while we were pounding out our stories. I mean, it was just intense. Like, it was just so bloody intense, because And nowadays,
the competition was just unbelievable.
The competition, but when we worked at the Sun, I mean, they couldn't get enough political news. I mean, Keith Aldry and myself were the two reporters, and of course we worked with Vaughn. But when we were there, I mean, it was not uncommon, Ian, for both of us to write like 5 stories. So that would be 10 stories that would be in the Sun. Not all of them were super long.
Yeah.
But if we weren't, one of us wasn't on the front page every single day that we were in Victoria, at least when the House was sitting, we would be so mad because we just lived it, we lived it, we breathed it, we were so competitive, everybody was so competitive, everybody wanted to break the story. I mean, and that's all gone. I mean, it's just all gone.
Well, the Sun and Province were owned by different corporations, different companies at the time.
For a while, yeah.
And there was a point where the Sun, the Province, and the Times Colonist were owned by the same company. So if you broke a story in the Times Colonist, it was in the Sun and Province. Now, in the old days, that didn't happen.
No.
I don't think we want to say the old days were better, but you know what? They were better.
Yeah, I mean, competition makes you better. There's no question about that. And I hate to say this because, I mean, it's an indictment of all of us, I suppose, but I'll tell you something. Politicians were much more they were on the hot spot a lot more back then than they are now. I mean, it was that the relationship between the press and politicians was often very, very tense. You think about, people like Marjorie Nichols. I mean, such a caustic columnist, but God, people loved her stuff. But man, oh man, I can't even imagine somebody writing in that kind of style and tone nowadays. It's just, and I'm not saying that all of that was necessarily good and all of what we're all about today is bad. I mean, but there's kind of a more refined relationship between the two sides. I mean, I think in some respects it's gotten a little too cozy in some cases, but yeah, the business has changed, and there's good, there's bad, but I really kind of yearn for I hate to say good old days, because it sounds terrible, but there was so much good that was happening back then in journalism.
I've been accused on this station by some listeners of being very rude to people I interview.
Uh-huh.
And when I get off the air and I talk to people, I say, you know what? You should have been down in the legislature and interviewed politicians. I mean, it wasn't the fact that we were rude, but you're aggressive in your questioning. And you have to be aggressive because politicians are masters of deceit, deception, and quite frankly, they lie.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with going after them. I mean, and it's not personal.
Yeah,
people think it's personal. It's not personal at all.
Yeah,
do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I have kind of a personal take on this whole thing, and occasionally I share it with people. But I came from a really working class background. I mean, our family didn't have a lot of money, and that was cool. But it's not like we ever, pined for a lot. But I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. And then, of course, I always had kind of a passing interest in American politics. And then this thing broke in the United States called Watergate. And these two young reporters, nobodies at the Washington Post, took down the President of the United States. And I thought, my God, look at that. Two reporters took down the most powerful person in the United States. And that had me hooked. I mean, I thought, okay, there's a profession that kind of equalizes this sort of the rich-poor divide, and sort of coming from one end of that, I thought, okay, I kind of saw journalism as kind of that power equalizer. And so when I ended up covering politics, I mean, I was like, in my head, Bernstein and Woodward and Bernstein, and I sort of thought there was a scandal behind everything. I mean, maybe that wasn't the best the way to think, but I'll tell you something. I think, and I wasn't the only one. There were lots of people that were motivated to get into journalism for exactly that reason. Woodward and Bernstein, spawned a whole generation of journalists. And we all, a lot of us wanted to cover politics, and we wanted to hold politicians' feet to the fire, and we did that very, very well.
And it's not being done today at all.
I don't. It's not being done in nearly to the same extent. No, not at all. And I think part of it gets back to what you were saying before. I mean, the competition is gone. I mean, there's just absolutely no competition, and then I think the lack of competition, I hate to say it, breeds a little bit of laziness. And I think, to be honest with you, Ian, I think the age of journalists has something to do with it too. We were young, we were hungry, we were competitive. And then,
we're not now?
Well, I like to still think I'm competitive, but what happens is as you get older and you kind of get settled and you acquire things and I don't know, it's the same reason rock singers don't make great songs when they're in their 50s. They've lost that thing that made them so good and made their songs so good early on in their lives. I really think that has something to do with it. Not everybody, because there are people in their 50s and 60s who are fantastic journalists and still ask really hard, provocative questions. But as a whole, I think journalists are aging, and that has an impact on things.
The interesting thing is, we just got a couple of minutes left, but the interesting thing is with you've got the best of both worlds. You can be a commentator, plus you can be a reporter. And so you can cover a story, yet insert your own opinions within that story, which not many people can.
I think, not to blow my own horn, I think I was a very good reporter, and I think if I'm a good columnist, it's because I was a good reporter, and I still am.
No, I agree.
Reporter.
You were a very good reporter.
Yeah,
and I think you still are. And you still break stories.
Yeah, I still think that I think to be a good columnist, you have to be a good reporter. I don't like to just opine, based on nothing. I like to go out and dig stuff up and base my columns around certain facts, which takes reporting. So. I always call myself a reporter first and a columnist second, because I'm proud to call myself a reporter.
Okay, I got a complaint.
Okay, go ahead.
I sent you an email when you were on vacation, and you didn't respond. The email was, I wanted to ask you if you'd be a guest on my program once a month.
Once a month on your...
Do you want to do that?
Well, you're putting me on the spot, but
I know I'm always. Because we're live on the air, buddy.
Well, okay, I'll make this.
I'll tell you what.
I've enjoyed this interview so much that I will certainly consider it if we can come to some sort of agreement on how long it's going to be, etc. Because I've really enjoyed this.
You sound like a politician. Gary, thanks. It was great. I had a lot of fun.
Man, what a guy.
So did I.
What a guy. You put the guy right in the spot, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I put him on the spot.
You really put him on the spot. Yeah. That's funny. How can he say no now, man? That's it.
Oh, I know. That's why when I had John Horgan on last week, and I invited him onto the show again.
Oh, man, you're kicking him under the table when you're doing it. I can hear it. Okay, listen, good point.